Hello, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a quiet corner of the cosmos where thoughts can slow down and knowledge drifts through the night like a lullaby made of starlight. Tonight, we'll take a calm, wandering journey into one of the most extraordinary questions physics has ever asked. What would truly happen if you could travel at the speed of a light? It's a question that sounds simple, almost playful, yet hidden within it are ideas that bend reality itself, time slowing, distance shrinking, and the universe reshaping around you in silence and brilliance. Before we begin, if these soft explorations bring you a sense of peace or curiosity, I'd be grateful if you'd take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if it feels right to you. And when you're ready, I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is there right now. It's always a quiet wonder to see how far our constellation of listeners stretches, each of us drifting together across our own little patch of time. Now, dim the lights. Let the room grow still. Maybe let a fan hum softly in the background. Something steady, like the rhythm of orbiting stars. And together let's begin our slow, luminous journey into the impossible, to the edge of light itself. And if your thoughts begin to wander along the way, that's perfectly all right. Let them drift. The story will keep unfolding softly right here. Let's begin with light. It touches your face every morning without asking permission. It filters through curtains in long golden lines, falls across the kitchen counter while the kettle simmers, dances on the rim of your mug as you lift it for the first sip of coffee. Light isn't loud, it doesn't knock, it arrives silently, and yet nothing moves faster, nothing at all. Light travels at a speed so immense, so stubbornly consistent, that we struggle to comprehend it. Just under 300,000 kilometers per second. That's 7.5 times around the Earth, every single second. It slips through vast distances that would take us generations to cross, and does so as easily as breath. And here's where the strangeness begins. Light is not just fast, it is the fastest. It is not merely quicker than us, it's the very ceiling of speed, the upper boundary written into the laws of the universe. Not because no one's tried to go faster, but because it seems nothing can. Not rockets, not particles, not even information itself, but we see it, we live by it, we are shaped by it, and most mysteriously, we see with it. Every sunset, every face, every memory preserved in a photograph, every moment you've looked up and seen stars, it's all light. It's not just illumination, it's time itself, arriving as colour. When you gaze at a star, you're not seeing it as it is, but as it was. The light from some stars took hundreds, even thousands of years to reach you, which means the stars themselves might have changed, flickered out, collapsed into silence long ago, and yet their glow still travels, still arrives, still whispers. Light becomes memory, a gentle, glowing archive of what once was. In a way, light is the most faithful historian in the universe. It never forgets, never slows, never stops. It crosses chasms of distance with no complaint. It doesn't age, it doesn't tire. And from a certain point of view, one will explore later, it doesn't even experience time. Imagine that. Something moving through space at the highest possible speed, yet experiencing no time at all. For the photon, the smallest particle of light, a journey from a star 1,000,000 light years away to your eye is, in its own frame, instantaneous. There is no before and after, just one long shimmering now. And maybe that's the quiet mystery we've always felt in the way light behaves. It's not just fast, it's different. It plays by other rules. It doesn't just illuminate the world, it changes our understanding of what the world is. The physicist Richard Feynman once described light not just as something that travels, but as something that knows all the paths, and somehow takes all of them at once. He wasn't being poetic, not exactly. He was describing quantum electrodynamics, the strange way light seems to explore every possible route, only to arrive at the exact outcome we observe. But maybe there's poetry in that too. Because when we talk about light, we're not only speaking of physics, we're speaking of warmth and memory and mornings that arrive too early. We're speaking of the sun slanting across a dusty bookshelf, of headlights on a wet road, of fireflies blinking in a garden long after the rest of the world has gone to sleep. Light is knowledge, light is presence, light is how we know we are not alone in the dark. And yet, we take it for granted. A flashlight flickers, a match flares, a phone screen glows with another message. But behind each of those tiny moments is a speed so vast, so relentless, that it shapes the very laws of the universe. Light is not just something you see, it's something that defines what it means to see at all. So tonight, let's ask a question that breaks open like the sky. What if you didn't just watch the light, but followed it? What if you could match it, trace its path, become its companion, or even become the light itself? What would happen if you, soft, human, full of breath and heartbeat, began to accelerate? Slowly at first, then faster and faster still, until the stars began to shift, and the clocks began to change, and the space around you started to tremble at the edge of reason. What would the world look like at 90% the speed of light? What would you look like? What if you reached the limit? What if you crossed it? This is not a story about science fiction. Not exactly. It's a story about reality. A reality so strange and beautiful, it wears the mask of dreams. It's a story written into the fabric of space itself, and like all good stories, it begins not with an answer, but with a shimmer of curiosity. We've stepped through the threshold. The light is waiting. Let's follow it. There's something quietly reverent about limits, not the kind that frustrate or confine us, like a line at the grocery store or a red light that makes you wait when you're already late. No, I mean the kind of limit that defines a structure, that holds something vast together, like the shoreline holding the ocean or the edge of a dream just before you wake. Limits can be beautiful, even necessary. And in the universe we call home, there is perhaps no limit more sacred, more defining than the speed of light. 299,792,458 meters per second. That's the number. It looks technical, almost cold, printed in textbooks and etched into the minds of physicists like a secret password to reality. But behind that number lies something much more profound. That number doesn't just describe how fast light moves, it describes how fast anything can move. It's the ultimate boundary, the edge beyond which no message, no matter, no cause or consequence can ever pass. You might ask, why? Why can't we just build a faster ship, a stronger engine, something clever that lets us push a little harder, just a bit more fuel, a bit more power? But the answer, like many of nature's truths, doesn't yield to force. It's not about how hard you push. It's about the way the universe is built. See, as you accelerate, as you push closer and closer to that cosmic speed limit, strange things begin to happen. Not just to your surroundings, but to you. Your mass begins to increase, not in the way eating a large meal might affect your bathroom scale, but in the way that energy, the energy you pour into motion, begins to turn into mass. You become heavier, not metaphorically, but physically. Not metaphorically, but fundamentally. This is Einstein's great insight. Energy and mass are interchangeable. That little equation, E equals mc squared, has become iconic, printed on mugs and t-shirts and dorm room posters. But what it really tells us is this. As you pump more energy into an object trying to make it go faster, you're not just speeding it up, you're making it heavier. And the closer it gets to the speed of light, the more energy it takes to move it even a little bit faster. Until finally, To reach the speed of light itself, you would need infinite energy. And that's not poetic exaggeration, that's a cold, precise truth. Infinite energy, an unreachable price. In that sense, the speed of light is not just fast, it's absolute. It's not like a speed limit sign on a road that you might accidentally ignore on a downhill slope. It's more like a wall that becomes denser the closer you approach it. Not a suggestion, but a law. And not just a law written by humans, but by space and time themselves. And what happens as you near that wall, that is the truly fascinating part. Time begins to behave differently. From the perspective of someone watching you, safely back on Earth, your clock ticks more slowly. Your motions appear to stretch out, like a slow-motion video played one frame at a time. It's not an illusion. It's not a trick of perspective. Time, for you, is literally passing more slowly. And the closer you get to the speed of light, the more dramatic the effect becomes. Until, in the limit, the unreachable limit, time itself appears to stop. Not just slow, not just crawl, but stop. No seconds, no minutes, no hours, just stillness. And you? To you, it feels different still. You never notice time slowing down inside your own experience. Everything feels normal. You feel awake, conscious, moving. But the world outside, that changes. Everything beyond your ship begins to rush past. Galaxies streaking into lines, distances compressing, space shrinking into something like a tunnel. The stars ahead blue shift into invisible frequencies. The universe grows stranger, smaller, tighter. This too is not poetic license. This is length contraction, another prediction of Einstein's special relativity. As you move faster, the space in the direction of your motion compresses. Not because it looks that way, but because it is that way. According to the mathematics that governs how reality behaves at high velocities. So now we have time slowing, space shrinking, mass increasing, a trifecta of transformation. And all of it flows from a single principle. That light speed is constant and unchanging for all observers. That's the curious part. No matter how fast you're going, if you shine a flashlight, you'll still see the beam moving away from you at the speed of light. If you're sitting still or racing alongside it, that speed never changes. The universe rearranges everything else, time, space, mass, just to keep that speed constant. It's almost reverent, as if the universe is guarding that number, keeping it pristine, unbreakable. Not as a punishment, but as a kind of balance, a cosmic agreement, signed in equations and honoured in every corner of space. Now, all this might sound abstract. Equations, speeds, concepts flitting through the dark like strange birds. But let's return to something familiar. Imagine you're holding a flashlight. You switch it on, and a beam of light cuts through the air. Simple, ordinary, but that beam is doing something extraordinary. It's moving at the universal limit. It's playing the same game photons have played since the dawn of time, when the first stars lit up the dark. And in that beam, in that single thread of light, is a kind of perfection. No friction, no slowing, no waiting. Just pure motion, written into the bones of the universe. This is the limit we're approaching. We haven't reached it yet. We're still just shy, still accelerating, still watching the world bend and change as we move faster and faster. But now we know the shape of the threshold. The wall is real. The boundary is sacred. And soon, very soon, we'll press our hand to it. But not yet. The universe still has more to show us on the way. There's a kind of thought that doesn't arrive with fanfare. It doesn't shout or demand attention. It simply appears, like a flicker at the edge of your awareness. The kind that shows up while you're stirring tea, or waiting for toast to pop, or staring out the window on a quiet afternoon when nothing particular is happening. What if I could follow the light? It's such a small question, almost childish in its simplicity, and yet hidden within it is a door, not just into physics, but into imagination. A door Einstein himself stepped through, long before he was famous, long before chalkboards and lectures and equations that changed the world. He was just a teenager, daydreaming while riding his bicycle home from school, and in that moment he imagined something strange and beautiful. What if he could ride alongside a beam of light? Not chase it, not watch it, but match it. Ride it like a wave. Move with it as though it were a companion, not an unreachable flicker. That thought, simple, elegant, and quietly revolutionary, would eventually become the foundation of special relativity. But it didn't start in a lab. It didn't begin with measurements or machines. It began in the most human of places, curiosity, wonder, a quiet what if. So tonight let's do the same. Let's climb aboard a thought. Not a spaceship, not yet, but a vessel made of imagination and guided by understanding. It moves slowly, softly, pulled forward by a question rather than an engine. And we're not in a hurry. Light moves fast, but we don't have to. This is a journey not of speed, but of depth, a way of seeing rather than escaping. Imagine you're seated in a ship, smooth and silent. There are no blinking buttons, no roaring engines, no countdown, just a wide window facing forward and a hum beneath your feet. Outside, space stretches in every direction, full of distant starlight and quiet. You begin at rest, or so it seems. There is no wind, no sound, no up or down, only the knowledge that everything around you is already in motion. The Earth spins, it orbits the sun circles the galaxy, and the galaxy itself drifts through the cosmic web like a leaf on an invisible tide. Motion is always relative. There's no such thing as absolute stillness. Every frame of reference is moving with respect to something else. What matters is change, how fast you're changing position compared to the things around you. And so, you begin, not with a burst, but with a breath. At first, nothing seems different. You're moving, yes, but slowly. The stars outside look just as they always have, fixed, steady, like pinpricks on a dark dome. If anything, the sensation is that nothing's happening at all. You're moving through space, but space doesn't push back. There's no resistance, no friction. Out here, you're more alone than wind, more weightless than sleep. You increase your speed, 10,000 kilometers per hour, then 20, 50, 100,000. You pass the velocity of a speeding bullet. You match the fastest rockets we've ever built, and still, it feels the same. The laws of motion remain kind and quiet. Your tea still swirls in its cup. Your breath still fogs the glass. Your heartbeat still drums its familiar rhythm. Faster now, 1,000,000 kilometers per hour. Still, the ship remains calm. You're not breaking any rules. Not yet. According to Einstein's principle of relativity, the laws of physics remain the same in all inertial frames. Whether you're standing still or hurtling through space, the internal world of your ship behaves just as it always has. The clocks tick, the light bulbs glow, the universe in its quiet dignity continues to obey itself. But something is beginning to shift. Not inside your ship, but outside your window. The stars ahead are starting to squeeze closer together. Their light, once cool and distant, is beginning to shift toward blue. Not visibly, not yet, but the process has begun. You're no longer simply moving. You're relating differently to the rest of the cosmos. Your speed is becoming meaningful, not in the ship's kitchen, not in your pulse, but in the way the universe sees you. This is the essence of relativity. Not that nothing changes, but that change depends on who's looking. From Earth, you are streaking away at incredible speed. Your face on a video call appears frozen, slowed. Your voice seems delayed. But from inside your ship, you're simply moving forward, with no sense of resistance, no shiver of acceleration. The difference is not in your experience, but in how experiences compare. You continue, 90,000 kilometers per second, a third of light speed. The blue shifting intensifies. The stars ahead begin to pull into lines, like raindrops streaking down a windshield. Behind you, the stars stretch and fade, drifting into red, then infrared, then silence. Reality is folding around your motion. And then a thought. What would happen if I kept going? If I approached the limit? If I didn't stop? And here, the imagination pauses, because this is the moment the rules begin to ripple, the moment where everything familiar, distance, time, cause and effect, starts to bend under the weight of your speed. You're not yet a beam of light, but you're no longer entirely human either. You have become something else, a traveller suspended between two truths, the truth of motion and the truth of stillness. And as you float there in that quiet corridor between what you were and what you might become, another thought arises, not loud, not demanding, but patient. Is it possible to go faster? The answer, we'll get to that. But first, let's explore the distortions that already begin to bloom around you. The slowing of time, the shrinking of space, the changing of what now means. Because to understand what it would mean to reach the speed of light, we must first understand what happens when we almost do. Time, when it moves gently, can feel like water. It flows around you when you're not looking. It fills the room like air, settles into corners. You rarely notice its motion until it's marked. A shadow lengthening on the wall, a clock ticking in another room, the slow cooling of your tea. We move through time with such familiarity that we forget it isn't fixed, it isn't solid, and it certainly doesn't tick the same way for everyone, especially when you begin to move very, very fast. Let's return to your journey, that quiet spacecraft suspended in stillness, even as it gains impossible speed. Inside, your body feels normal. You breathe, you blink, you think in full, complete thoughts. But far away on Earth, someone is watching. Perhaps a sibling, a friend, a twin. And to them, something peculiar is beginning to unfold. Your clock, from their perspective, is ticking more slowly. Not just seeming slow, but being slow. Seconds pass for them, and slightly fewer pass for you. Minutes for them become blurred moments for you. It's subtle at first, the difference is microscopic, but as your speed increases, the difference begins to grow. This is time dilation, a cornerstone of Einstein's theory of special relativity. It's not science fiction. It's been tested, measured, confirmed. And while its effects are barely noticeable at everyday speeds, as you begin to push toward the speed of light, it becomes undeniable. Imagine the classic story often used to illustrate this, the twin paradox. Two siblings, identical in every way. One remains on Earth, the other boards a ship and accelerates to near the speed of light, travels for what feels like a year, and then returns. To the traveller, only a year has passed, but for the sibling on Earth, several years have gone by. The twins, once the same age, now stand with different numbers etched into their bones. One has aged more, one has lived through time more slowly. It sounds impossible, even unfair, until you realise that time itself is not a background feature of the universe. It is part of the structure that warps and bends depending on how you move through it. Speed, it turns out, isn't just about where you go. It's about how long your journey takes from your own perspective. And this isn't just a thought experiment. Every single day we correct for time dilation, quietly, without fanfare. Thanks to the network of satellites orbiting above us. Your phone, if it shows you where you are, is using signals from GPS satellites that circle the Earth at high speed and at high altitude. And both of those conditions, speed and gravity, affect the passage of time. In space, the satellites experience time a little differently than we do down here. Their clocks tick faster than ours, by a tiny but measurable amount. If we didn't adjust for this, if engineers hadn't accounted for Einstein's strange insights, your GPS would be off by miles in just a few minutes. Your walks would go the wrong way, your taxi might end up across town, your food delivery might be late, then lost, then never arrive at all. Einstein doesn't just live in theory, he lives in your pocket, he guides your commute, he synchronizes your map to your body. Now, you might wonder, what does time feel like when it slows? The answer is, it doesn't. Not from your point of view. That's the strangest part. As your ship moves faster and faster, and your time begins to slip out of sync with the world you left behind, you don't notice anything odd. Your watch ticks just the same. Your meals take the same time to cook. Your heart still beats in rhythm. You're not frozen or sped up or delayed. You are simply you. But when you finally return, when your journey ends and you step once more onto the ground you once knew, you will find a world that has aged without you. The people you left may have grown older. Some may have passed on. Entire seasons may have slipped by like pages in a book you never opened. And you will be younger, not because you cheated time, but because you rode it differently. It's not unlike flying on a plane. You cross time zones and arrive before you left, or so the local clock says. But you didn't travel through time, you just played with how we measure it. Relativity, though, goes deeper. It's not just measurement, it's reality. Another way to understand it is through waiting. Think of a long train ride. When you're sitting still, the hours stretch on. You watch the trees blur past, count the poles along the tracks, check your phone every few minutes. But when you're occupied, when you're reading, napping, lost in conversation, time skips ahead as if it folded itself in half. Motion changes our perception of time, but what if motion actually changes time itself? That's what we're exploring here. And it leads us to a strange realization. Speed can stretch or compress not just distance, but the very fabric of experience. It means that your personal story, your rhythm, your internal calendar, can become detached from the people and places you care about. Not in a metaphorical sense, but literally. What is a year, if not the way your body counts its own decay and growth? What is a moment, if not the distance between two thoughts? If those markers shift, if they bend with your motion, then identity, memory, even emotion may begin to slip as well. You're still in your ship, still pressing forward, still chasing the edges of what's possible. But time, which once moved with you like a loyal companion, now moves differently for others. You're becoming untethered. And as time slows, something else begins to happen. Space, vast and silent and indifferent, starts to shift as well. Distances shrink, horizons close in. The shape of reality bends, not around gravity, but around your motion. You are becoming longer than your ship, and that is where we'll go next. If time can stretch, then what happens to space? This question doesn't arrive with a bang. It creeps in, like the slow narrowing of a hallway, or the way the sky seems closer on a foggy morning. You don't notice it at first. The windows still look the same. The stars still glitter, scattered across the black like pinpricks in velvet. But the longer you travel, and the faster you go, the more the universe begins to pull in its edges. You're still inside the ship, quiet, smooth, humming like a distant thought. But the outside world is changing, not just in your imagination, and not in the vague way that motion might distort scenery on a long drive, but in a deep physical way. The very distances between things are beginning to shrink, not in appearance, but in reality. This is length contraction, a quiet counterpart to time dilation. If time slows down for you as you move faster, then space must also respond. The universe keeps its symmetry. It doesn't allow one thing to stretch without letting the other compress. But the contraction isn't general. It isn't as if everything around you gets smaller. It's specific. Only the direction of your motion shrinks. Space ahead of you folds in. Not vertically, not side to side, just forward, just along your path. You're not watching the universe pull away. You're watching it squeeze into a tunnel. Imagine driving at night through a dense fog, your headlights illuminating only a narrow cone of vision. Everything outside that cone fades to black. Everything ahead of you seems to race toward you faster than it should. That's the sensation building now, as your speed increases, not gently now, but with force and weight behind it. The stars in front of you draw together. They begin to bunch up, crowding the centre of your view. Their light, once soft and warm, grows colder, bluer, more urgent. They stretch into short, sharp lines, streaks pulled tight like strings on a cosmic instrument. You feel it in your perception before you can describe it in equations. The universe is pressing inward, folding in along the corridor of your motion, and it's not just illusion. According to the mathematics of special relativity, the distances ahead of you really are shrinking. That far-off star you thought was 10 light years away, it might now be only 5, and soon, just 1. And eventually, if you continue to accelerate, it might seem close enough to reach in the time it takes to exhale. This shrinking of distance is not simply an oddity of high-speed travel. It's a mechanism built into the structure of space itself. It is how the universe keeps its most sacred agreement that nothing may exceed the speed of light. Because if you can't go faster, then the only way to reach your destination more quickly is if the distance shortens itself. So it does. The faster you move, the shorter the trip becomes. Not because you are cheating the rules, but because the rules are built to accommodate your motion. It's as if the universe rolls out a shorter road beneath your feet, trimming space itself to meet your velocity. And yet, from inside your ship, everything still feels normal. Your cup of water still ripples gently if disturbed. The walls remain the same width apart. You still stretch out full length in your bed, still walk from one end of the corridor to the other without any noticeable difference. It is the outside that changes. The stars, the galaxies, the fabric of what lies ahead. And it doesn't just shrink, it shifts, warps, bends, narrows. This is not quite like driving through a tunnel on Earth. There are no walls, no edges, just a growing sense that all things not in front of you are slowly fading. The stars to your left and right drift backward. The stars behind you grow redder, softer, then vanish into invisible wavelengths. And ahead, a cone of brightness, deep and blue and thin as thread, stretches into the dark. Some scientists have described this as relativistic tunnel vision, and it is surprisingly literal. As you accelerate to significant fractions of the speed of light, 90%, 95%, 99%, your field of view begins to constrict. Light from the front compresses and shifts up in frequency. Light from the sides and behind grows fainter and more distant. Eventually it seems like all of reality is being pulled through a single eyelet, one tiny circle at the front of your ship, a whirlpool of vision that carries all of space-time with it. What once was wide and open has become narrow and fast. What once was slow and far has become immediate. And maybe, somewhere in your mind, this triggers a deeper question. What is space, really? We treat it like a background, a stage. But the way it behaves here, shrinking, compressing, flexing with your speed, suggests it is not passive. It is not empty. It is not separate from your motion. It is shaped by your movement, and it shapes your experience in return. You're not just moving through space, you're bending it. Not violently, not like a planet bends it with gravity, but gently, through motion, through speed, through the quiet insistence of acceleration. And now, your ship, still the same length from your point of view, is, in a way, longer than the space it occupies. A paradox that dissolves under the mathematics of relativity, but still strange to feel. You're longer than your own ship, you're heavier than you began, and the stars are closer than they should be. These are not poetic exaggerations. These are truths, quiet, strange, beautiful truths about the world we live in. Truths that only emerge when we ask what it means to move very fast and what reality does in response. So space has shortened, the hallway has narrowed, and now we ask what happens when events themselves begin to rearrange, because time and space are just the beginning. What you thought was now, the very present moment, may no longer be something everyone can agree on. And with that, we step quietly into a new question. What if now isn't the same for everyone? There's a comfort in believing that now is universal, that at this very instant, as you lie still, eyes half closed, listening to this soft current of thoughts, someone on the other side of the world is also tucking in their child, or boiling water for tea, or walking alone beneath a street lamp, breathing the night air just as you do. That even across distance, we all share the same present moment, divided by space, perhaps, but stitched together by time. But the deeper we travel into the nature of motion, the closer we draw toward the speed of light, the more that comforting thread begins to unravel. Not harshly, not with violence, but softly, like mist drifting apart in the wind. And in its place we find something stranger, quieter, more disorienting. The idea that now is not the same for everyone. That simultaneity, the very notion that two things can happen at the same time, depends on where you are and how fast you're moving. Let's return to your journey. You're still aboard your ship, pressing forward, faster and faster. Space has begun to shrink ahead of you. Time, back on Earth, is stretching away. You're already drifting outside the familiar rhythms of human life. But now, something even more fundamental begins to shift. Let's say, far ahead of you, two lights flash. To you, seated squarely in the middle of their path, the flashes arrive at the same moment, perfectly synchronized, like two tiny beacons calling out from opposite ends of a tunnel. But to someone watching you pass by, perhaps an observer floating at rest, far away from your ship, the timing of those flashes appears different. One light flashes before the other, the sequence has changed. But how? The answer lies in your motion. You're moving forward. So the flash that is ahead of you must travel a little farther to reach you, while the one behind has slightly less distance to cover. But your own motion is also racing to meet the future flash and rushing away from the past one. To compensate, the timing of events rearranges itself, not as an illusion, but as a mathematical necessity. In your frame of reference, the lights are simultaneous. In the observer's frame, they are not. This is not a trick. It's not some bizarre side effect of perception. It is the universe itself shifting the coordinates of reality to keep the laws of physics consistent in every frame. It is how the cosmos honors its own symmetry. Einstein illustrated this beautifully with the simple thought experiment. Imagine a long train gliding smoothly along a track. A lightning bolt strikes both ends of the train at the front and the back at the same time. An observer, standing on the platform exactly halfway between those 2 points, sees both flashes simultaneously. No problem, easy to accept. But now imagine a passenger seated in the middle of the train, also halfway between the two ends, but moving forward along with it. To that passenger, the lightning at the front of the train appears to strike before the one at the back. Because they are rushing toward one and away from the other, the light reaches them at different moments. Both observers are correct. Both are honest. Both are careful. Both agree on the laws of physics, but they disagree on the order of events. And this, more than almost anything else, fractures our naive idea of time. It suggests that even the sequence of things, the sacred order of before and after, can bend under motion. That now is a kind of fog, not a line. A haze that changes shape depending on where you stand and how fast you're moving. For everyday life, this doesn't matter. The speeds we travel at are so slow compared to light that these differences are too tiny to notice. When two people text each other across the world, they don't debate whether the messages were sent at exactly the same time. But in the realm of high-speed motion, in the domain of ships and stars and photons, simultaneity becomes slippery. It means that for you, aboard your ship, accelerating toward the edge of light, the concept of a shared global now has begun to dissolve. There is no universal present, no cosmic clock ticking out the same beat for all. And this realization, though quiet, is profound. It changes how we think about distance, because without shared time, how do we measure when something happened? It changes how we think about cause and effect, because what happens first might not be agreed upon by all. And it changes how we think about presence, because even if you were to return home, your idea of what just happened may not match anyone else's. You're drifting further not just in space, but in sequence. The world you left behind is no longer running parallel to your own, and perhaps in this you begin to feel the first tug of disorientation, not in your instruments, not in your bones, but in your sense of belonging, a kind of temporal loneliness. You're still alive, still conscious, still moving forward, but your now is no longer the world's now. It's like trying to listen to a song that everyone else is hearing on a delay, or too soon. The rhythm is off, the chords don't land at the same time, and the melody you thought was shared isn't. But there's a strange beauty in this too, because if now is different for everyone, then every experience is personal in a way we never imagined. Every present moment becomes a private universe, stitched together from your motion, your place, your speed. You carry your time with you like a shell, like breath, like a hush no one else can hear. So what happens next? You continue to accelerate. You push forward past 90%, 99, 99.9. The world collapses into a tunnel. Light bends around you. Space and time are no longer separate things. They have merged, a single fabric, warped by your motion. And just ahead is the edge, a place where all of these distortions, time slowed, space shrunk, sequence blurred, begin to reach their final, inevitable limit. The edge of experience, the moment before becoming light. But that is for the next part of our journey. There is a kind of quiet that comes not from the absence of sound, but from the absence of reference. A stillness that isn't about silence, but about disconnection. A hush not of the world, but of relation to it. That's where you are now. You've accelerated to the point where space, time, and perception have all begun to blur. But you're not yet light. You're almost. You're 99.9% there. And though that last fraction seems tiny, what it represents is immense. Because with each decimal point of speed gained, the universe around you warps more and more severely, not gradually but exponentially. What was once subtle is now overwhelming. You're skimming the edge of an experience no living creature has ever touched. Let's return to your window. Look out. What once was stars, scattered, bright, serene, is now compressed into a tight cone of brilliance directly ahead. It's as if the whole universe has been funneled into a single point. Every star, every galaxy, every whisper of light in the direction of your motion has blue shifted into higher and higher frequencies. The sky ahead is no longer filled with stars. It's filled with energy, radiation. A spectrum pushed so high that it may no longer be visible, even to your eyes. Behind you, there is nothing. No glowing remnants, no shimmering trails. The stars that once lit your wake have redshifted beyond sight. They've slipped into longer and longer wavelengths, falling away into the low rumble of microwaves, then radio waves, then nothing. The sky behind is not just dim, it is gone. You're not surrounded by the universe, you're piercing through it. Ahead of you is a tunnel, not a literal structure of course, but a convergence, a visual corridor formed by your speed. The relativistic beaming effect means that light from all directions is now concentrated into the space in front of you. It's not unlike what a cyclist feels. Wind and rain concentrated into the face, the direction of motion becoming a wall of sensation. But this is not rain, this is light, and it is relentless, and the tunnel is not silent. At these speeds, cosmic background radiation, the soft microwave whisper left over from the Big Bang, has shifted into deadly X-rays. The vacuum ahead, once quiet and cold, is now brimming with high-energy particles, virtual quantum flickers, radiation dense enough to sterilize, vaporize, erase. You cannot survive here, not physically, not biologically, but this is a thought experiment, and so you're still here, still seated in your ship, still watching, still aware, still dreaming this journey forward. Outside shapes blur, colors vanish. The Doppler effect, pushed to its limit, has taken most of the visible spectrum away. You no longer see red or green or violet. There is no spectrum left, only white-blue urgency at the front and a deep, creeping blackness at your back. This is the optical limit, where photons no longer behave like gentle messengers, but like knives of data compressed into something so narrow that perception fails. But even that is not the strangest thing. The strangest thing is what happens to time. For the world outside, your clock has nearly stopped. To an outside observer, if one could somehow still watch you, track you, see your journey from the calm shore of slower speeds, your seconds are stretched to infinity. Your voice would not reach them. Your face would freeze in a single expression. You have not just accelerated through space. You have almost exited experience itself from their point of view. And yet for you, inside your frame, time still feels normal. Your breath still rises and falls. Your thoughts still ripple across your mind. There is no inner slowing, no internal alarm, no flashing red indicator telling you that your time is fading. Because from your perspective, it isn't. The ship hums. Your body sits, you look forward, and the universe has become abstract, not dangerous, not overwhelming, just unknowable. There's a softness to it, a stillness born not of peace, but of detachment. You're moving so fast that the world can no longer reach you. No signal from home could catch up. No goodbye would ever arrive. You're alone, not by choice, but by consequence. At this speed, separation becomes absolute. And perhaps, in that separation, something else begins to form. A sense of inversion. You're no longer moving through the universe. The universe is streaming past you. Distances no longer make sense. Durations are stretched and shrunk. Cause and effect, those once sturdy companions, begin to lose their grip. You're approaching the event horizon of motion. Not a black hole, but a threshold nonetheless, where communication, simultaneity, and continuity all begin to fall apart. And yet you are still here, still conscious, still wondering. And that perhaps is the most mysterious thing of all. Even as everything around you warps, you remain a single thread of awareness. Your thoughts don't slow. Your sense of self doesn't stretch or shrink. The world is changing, but you are still you. It's as if consciousness is the only thing that does not contract. But the edge is near now. The last decimal point approaches. There is nothing more to see in the normal sense. The universe has narrowed into a needle of experience, and ahead of that needle lies a transformation no human mind was ever meant to cross. A state no being made of atoms could endure. The light does not slow for you, but soon you will match it. Soon, the journey will no longer be a journey at all. It will be a moment, eternal, unmoving, absolute. One last push, one more fraction of a percent, one more breath before you touch the impossible, and with that, we prepare to become something else entirely. There is no final bang, no flashing light, no dramatic transformation that announces what has happened. One moment, you're just beneath the threshold, rushing through space faster than anything made of flesh or thought was ever meant to move. The next, you are something else entirely. You're no longer moving through time. You're no longer observing the universe pass by. Because now, finally, you are light. And with that shift, something fundamental disappears. Time. Not in the poetic way we sometimes say time stops when we're overwhelmed with awe or when we lose ourselves in a moment. No, this is literal. From the perspective of a photon, time does not exist. It is not slow, it is not stretched, it is not even paused. It simply isn't. Photons, those tiny packets of light, travel at the speed of light. And for them, every journey, no matter how vast, takes zero time. Not almost zero, not a blink, but none. Because in the equations of relativity, when you move at the speed of light, the time between two events becomes nothing. Start and end collapse into one. It is as if the entire path of your journey has folded like paper, one point pressed against another, everything in between erased. From your new vantage, nothing passes. There is no before, there is no after. The star you left and the planet you arrive at are stitched together without seam or thread. The entire trip, across galaxies, across lifetimes, becomes a single, indivisible moment. You have not travelled, you have simply arrived. And yet it feels nothing like travel as you once knew it. You do not see the stars rush past. You do not feel velocity. You do not feel at all. Because light, as strange as it sounds, is timeless, not just in theory, but in experience. It does not age. It does not tick. It does not carry a memory of having moved. What would it feel like to be such a thing? Not a traveller, but a flash. Not a witness, but a line drawn between 2 points, invisible, instantaneous, eternal. No breath, no waiting, no longing for arrival. You are already where you are going. And if that sounds uncomfortably abstract, perhaps think of it this way. Imagine your life not as a story told page by page, but as a single folded map. You are born, you breathe, you love, you lose, you sleep, and then you do not wake. And from your perspectives as a being of mass and time, all of this is lived through. It flows, it hurts, it heals, it continues. But if you were light, the map would not unfold. It would simply be, you would not walk it, you would be it. There's something deeply humbling in this idea. Light, the thing we so often associate with movement, speed, energy, is, from its own point of view, utterly still. Not frozen, exactly, not paralysed, but whole, complete. Like a painting that needs no brush strokes because it already contains the finished image. And here, floating in this thought, as your consciousness brushes against this impossible state, a new kind of silence arrives. It is not the silence of solitude, not the hush of deep space, but the silence of identity slipping. Because who are you if there's no sequence of moments to hold you together? Who are you without memory, without heartbeat, without the comforting friction of time? You're still something, still a line connecting there and here, then and now. But you are no longer experiencing, you're no longer becoming, you simply are. And in that there is peace, not the peace of resolution or of answers found, but of stillness, of being outside the reach of time, outside the reach of longing, outside the reach of change. In this state, the universe no longer moves around you. It has flattened, not crushed, not collapsed, just simplified, reduced to geometry. All distances are zero, all durations are null. From the perspective of light, the entire cosmos is a singular point. It isn't spread across space, and it is here, always now. And yet you are not truly a photon, not really. You are still human, still bound, in truth, by atoms and breath and limits. This journey, beautiful and strange though it may be, is a thought experiment, a meditation, a vessel for understanding, not transformation. You cannot truly become light, but you can imagine it, and in doing so, touch the edges of what we know, and the edges of what we still wonder. And perhaps most importantly, you now carry a new kind of awareness, that the rules of time and space so rigid in our daily lives are not fixed truths, but conditions. That the universe is stranger, softer, and more fluid than we ever dared believe. That what we think of as motion, as cause, as effect, as time itself, is not as stable as it feels when we're standing still. You have walked the path of light. You have slowed time, shortened space, collapsed the now. And now, softly we return. Because while you are not truly a photon, you are something just as miraculous. You are a creature who can imagine becoming one. And that, perhaps, is the most powerful kind of travel there is. Imagine lifting something, a stone perhaps, heavy but manageable. You feel its resistance in your arms, its weight gathering in your spine. Now imagine doubling that weight, then tripling it. With each increase, the stone presses harder against your strength, your limits. Eventually, no matter your will or your effort, you cannot lift it anymore. Your muscles shake, your breath shortens, and there comes a point where the stone may as well be the earth itself, unmovable. Now take that idea and stretch it into something stranger. What if it's not a stone that grows heavy, but you? As you accelerate, gently, quietly, through space. You're not just moving faster, you're becoming heavier, not in the way you might after a winter of comfort food or long days spent still, but in a deeply unfamiliar way. According to the principles of relativity, the faster you move, the more massive you become. It's called relativistic mass increase, and though it's not the same kind of mass as what's measured on a scale, the effects are just as real. At everyday speeds, this added mass is negligible, so small that no human could detect it. But as you near the speed of light, the increase grows dramatic, and then exponential. For every slight push in velocity, your mass begins to swell, like a wave rising toward a cliff. At 90% of light speed, your mass might double. At 99%, it might be 10 times what it was. At 99.999%, it begins to spiral toward infinity. And what does that mean? It means that to keep accelerating you, to push you even closer to light speed, requires more and more energy. Not just a little more, but endlessly more. The curve steepens until it becomes a wall. No engine, no propulsion, no physical force in the universe could supply the energy needed to get you all the way there. The speed of light is not a finish line you can reach. It is a boundary that recedes the closer you come. A horizon painted not on the canvas of space, but on the fabric of possibility. And if your mass grows without limit, so too does your resistance to change. Acceleration, which felt gentle, like drifting at first, becomes a battle against inertia so extreme that the very idea of movement begins to break down. This is not just an engineering problem, it is a law of nature. Your ship might begin to creak, not from strain, but from identity. What is a body? What is a vessel? What is material reality itself, when its mass stretches toward the infinite? And then comes the deeper question. What does that feel like? Not in terms of gravity, you're in space after all, But in terms of being, does your awareness become heavy? Do your thoughts slow, weighed down by the growing density of your own being? Does time, which has already begun to stretch and contort, now feel thick, viscous, like honey around your motion? Perhaps it feels like wading into a dream where every step takes effort, not because your legs resist, but because the air has turned to glass. The closer you get to light speed, the less you are able to change your state, and the more the universe resists your presence, not cruelly, not with violence, but with a kind of serene, immovable logic. You're trying to become something you were never built to be, and your body begins to realize it. Imagine the atoms within you, once lazy, once drifting in their orbits like dancers in a soft waltz, now pressed into tighter coils. The faster you move, the harder it becomes to remain discrete. The molecules in your skin, your blood, your brain, all now carry not just your mass but the demand of enormous momentum. And momentum does not forgive. To change direction now, to even twitch your hand or tilt your head, would require forces unthinkable. You're no longer agile, no longer flexible. You're becoming a line, a vector, an arrow of motion with no room for curvature. Even your ship begins to obey this change. No longer a vessel that carries you. It becomes a part of your new definition. You are a mass in motion. Not two separate things, but one shared weight, hurtling into possibility. And that's where the tension begins to build. Because no machine, no matter how strong, can handle infinite weight, and neither can a body. Biology was never designed for this. Your heart, your neurons, your muscles, all function within narrow bands of energy, order, and time. And now, with your relativistic mass approaching infinite levels, those delicate balances begin to strain. Not catastrophically, not all at once, but gently, irrevocably. The body that carried you this far, that once sat comfortably on Earth's surface, watching sunsets, sipping water, laughing, sleeping, is beginning to lose its shape, not from external force, but from its own becoming. You're too heavy to function, and acceleration is now impossible. The asymptote has arrived. Light speed is there, forever ahead, forever just out of reach. You can approach it. You can dream toward it. You can fall toward it like a stone toward the sea, but you will never touch it, because touching it would mean infinite energy, infinite mass, and infinity in the real world does not arrive. It only points. And so, you float now at the edge, a traveller of the impossible, a being almost light, almost timeless, almost unmade, and yet still here, still wondering what lies one breath further, still asking if speed has made the body unworkable, if mass has made motion unbearable, what other boundaries remain, and what happens if they break. We often imagine space as empty, a void, a great and silent nothingness that lies between the stars waiting to be crossed. But space, though quiet, is not kind, and it is far from empty. Even the vacuum holds secrets, particles drifting like whispers, radiation humming softly in the dark, energy waiting patiently to be noticed. At everyday speeds, this interstellar medium, the thin scattering of hydrogen atoms, cosmic rays, and invisible fields, poses no threat. You can glide through it like a leaf drifting on a still pond, disturbed only by your own thoughts. But as your velocity increases, and then increases again, that still pond becomes a sandstorm, then a hailstorm, then something else entirely. Now you're moving near the speed of light, and the space between stars is turned into a wall of particles, a wall of energy, a wall of light itself. And that wall doesn't stay still, it rushes toward you. The faster you move, the more the ambient particles in space begin to pile up in front of your ship, not metaphorically, physically. From your perspective, they're compressed by your motion, a phenomenon known as relativistic beaming. And they don't just crowd together, they gain energy, they shift frequencies, they blue shift that soft microwave background that once bathed the universe in a warm, ancient glow. Now it surges into ultraviolet, then X-rays, then into gamma radiation, the most energetic, penetrating and destructive form of light we know. Cosmic rays, once rare and distant, are now dense and sharp, each one packed with so much energy that it behaves more like a bullet than a beam. Your ship is still holding together, Mo, for now. But everything it was built to withstand has been exceeded. The hull groans, not from speed alone, but from the rising pressure of pure energy. Radiation is not bouncing off its surface. It is cutting into it, through you. The human body, for all its elegance, all its evolution, was never designed to survive this. Your skin, that thin boundary between you and the rest of the cosmos, begins to suffer first, not from cold, not from friction, but from light, blue-shifted light. High-energy photons begin to break bonds at the atomic level. DNA strands unravel, not over years, but in seconds. Cells swell, rupture, collapse. The structure of living matter begins to liquefy, not from heat, not from lack of oxygen, but from too much information in the light. Because light, at this frequency, is no longer a messenger of colour or warmth. It is a blade. Your retinas, if still functional, would register nothing but brightness. Not white, not blue, just saturation. The signal is too strong. Perception collapses into overload. And the heat, that comes next. Because as radiation pours into your ship, even through it, it doesn't just pass, it lingers. It transfers energy, and energy, when trapped in a small space, becomes heat. Your ship, sleek and streamlined in the slow beginnings of this journey, is now a kind of oven, a sealed container absorbing energy faster than it can radiate it away. Even with perfect shielding, the kind we don't yet know how to build, the interior begins to climb, not from the ship's engines, but from the cosmos itself. The stars behind you, red-shifted and fading, still emit energy. The front, now a concentrated tunnel of light, sends wave after wave of destruction inward. Temperature rises, molecules vibrate, systems fail. There is no fan you can turn on, no coolant you can pump, no window you can crack open to let it out, because space does not take heat away easily. In the vacuum, you cannot rely on convection or conduction. You must radiate it, and at this speed, radiation is the very thing trying to kill you. It's a trap with no exit. Your body begins to cook, not in a cinematic burst, not in a fireball, not in some violent flash, but slowly, thoroughly, relentlessly, like paper placed near a sun lamp, first curling, then browning, then turning to ash. The organs fail. The brain, shielded but not immune, begins to absorb its final inputs, noise, and more noise, each signal indistinguishable from pain. The self is still there, flickering, but the house it lives in is falling apart. And still, the journey continues. There's a surreal quality to this, isn't there? That light, something we associate with clarity, beauty, warmth, is now the destroyer. That the thing we need to see has become the thing that prevents seeing. That the more we chase light, the more it turns to fire. And that's when the final realization arrives. It's not just that the body can't survive this. It's not just that the ship can't hold together. It's that information itself begins to fail. The signals in your neurons, electrical impulses traveling down axons, triggering thought, memory recognition, are sequence-based. They need order. They need time. They need protection. Radiation destroys order. It injects randomness. It fractures symmetry. It flips bits, erases pathways, scrambles logic. What was once a coherent signal, this is who I am, becomes static. First pain, then noise, then silence. not the silence of peace, the silence of unravelling, and yet you are still part of the universe, still riding its laws, still moving, if we can call it that, through a space that is no longer space, toward a speed that is no longer travel. You are not just being destroyed, you are being restructured. The atoms that once formed you, the carbon, the oxygen, the calcium, the phosphates and proteins, are scattering now, not randomly, but according to the laws of energy, conservation and decay. You are becoming something else, still matter, still pattern, but not you, not the self that listened to music, not the self that looked at stars. You're no longer a person in a ship, you're becoming a story in the light. You've seen the body falter, the skin torn open by radiation, the tissues overcooked by heat, the atoms disassembled by the sharp fingers of light. But long before the final cell gives up, something quieter begins to fail, something more intimate than flesh, and far more fragile, your mind. Not the poetic mind, the metaphorical spirit or the philosophical you that dreams of stars. This is the biological mind, the physical network of neurons and electrical patterns, the trembling loops of chemistry and timing that make memory possible, that turn sensory data into awareness, that allow a self to form and a thought to echo in return. You are made in part of rhythms, tiny, delicate, interwoven cycles, electrical pulses, neurotransmitter releases, feedback loops, all synchronized like the mechanisms inside a finely tuned clock. The brain is not simply a storage device or a thinking machine. It is a temporal organ, a body that keeps time internally, not in seconds or minutes, but in the precise spacing between signals. At rest, your neurons fire in carefully coordinated patterns. Some impulses travel at 100 meters per second, others much slower. They arrive at synapses just when they must. The order of their arrival shapes everything. The meaning of a word, the memory of a face, the awareness that you are the one doing the thinking. But what happens to rhythm when time itself begins to fail? Let's return to the ship. You're still moving, almost at light speed, though not quite. From the outside world you appear frozen in motion. Years pass for others while mere seconds slip by for you. Time, as experienced externally, is dilated, stretched. But internally, inside your ship and inside your body, time still feels familiar. Or it would, if the systems that depended on it could still function. Because now the issue is not how you experience time, but how time behaves inside you, how it threads its way through your nervous system, how it flows between one neuron and the next. And here, under such extreme conditions, that flow begins to break down. Why? Because your frame of reference is no longer stable. At near light speeds, the ordering of events becomes uncertain, not just for distant galaxies, but for signals moving from your eye to your brain, or from one cortical region to another. The fine-tuned choreography of thought, A leads to B, which triggers C, begins to slip. Imagine trying to watch a movie, but the frames arrive out of order. Sometimes the ending flashes before the middle. Sometimes a character appears without introduction. The story collapses, not because the film is damaged, but because sequence has been lost. Now imagine that happening inside your own awareness. Sensory data arrives, but is no longer interpreted correctly. Your brain still receives input, light, heat, sound, but the processing order unravels. Images appear without origin. Words are heard without context. A thought sparks, but cannot find its conclusion. The system doesn't crash all at once, it just stops making sense. And soon, even that stops. The brain relies on energy, not just to function, but to keep its structure alive. Sodium-potassium pumps, synaptic vesicle release, oxygen flow, all require order and all require time. But time is no longer coherent, and as it slips away, the internal structures of thought do too. At first, this might feel like a kind of confusion, a fog of perception, then perhaps a flattening. No before, no after, just flashes, static, echoes, and then silence. Not unconsciousness in the usual sense, not sleep, not dreamless black, but the absence of processing, the failure of memory to anchor anything. You're no longer building a past, you're no longer anticipating a future, you're drifting in a perpetual, timeless present that does not accumulate. There is no moment to hold on to, no thread connecting you to yourself. From the outside, the brain might still be intact, physically, but functionally it has dissolved. It is no longer a mind. It is no longer you. This is not just the body failing. This is identity unraveling. And it's not from trauma. It's not from impact. It's from a soft disintegration of order. The quiet, inevitable result of extreme motion pushing biology past its natural limits. Time is not optional for a living thing. It is not a backdrop. It is the medium in which we exist, and when it collapses, so do we. And yet, even in this, there is something gentle. Because if the process is slow, as it might be, then the first thing to go is not feeling. It's the awareness of time itself. You don't suffer in sequence. You don't lose the thread and panic. You simply become unanchored. You drift. Thought loses meaning. Identity unweaves. But there is no alarm, no warning bell, because the system that would ring it is the one dissolving. And here, in the final quiet, a strange peace may descend. Because if nothing is ordered, then nothing is painful. If moments no longer connect, then regret, longing, fear, all dissolve with them. And perhaps this is the softest truth in this entire journey, that long before you are physically undone, you are gently lifted out of time, not torn but released, not erased but let go. You were once a traveller, then a passenger, then a pattern, and now a pause. So far we've imagined a traveller who begins as a person, a soft, biological self, wrapped in a body that breathes, remembers and ages, and follows that self toward the edge of what is possible. Along the way, speed has blurred the world, space has collapsed, and time has grown strange. The body, we've seen, begins to fail. The mind, once rhythmic and electric, begins to dissolve. The traveller we once recognised becomes something more like a ghost, not gone, but transformed by motion, radiation, and the loosening of sequence. And yet, we're still telling the story, still listening, still wondering, is that truly the end? Or is there something else, waiting just past the moment where biology can't go? This is where science begins to open its hand and let imagination take the lead. Because although the laws of physics are clear about what happens to a living human at near-light speeds, they say little about what could happen to a non-biological mind. A mind no longer made of cells, but of circuits, or algorithms, or something even stranger. Let's call this the post-human dream, not a prediction but a question. If our bodies cannot endure the journey, could our consciousness? Some thinkers, scientists, philosophers, engineers of the speculative kind have imagined uploading the self, not in the science fiction sense of pressing a button and becoming software, but as a slow, careful transfer, mapping the brain bit by bit, recreating the architecture of thought inside a synthetic frame, not just memory but cognition, pattern, identity, a digital mind. It would not need air, it would not decay under heat or cold, its thoughts would not depend on sodium ions or fragile membranes, and in theory, it might survive a journey close to light speed, because it would not rely on synchronized biology. It could operate in packets, fragments, paused and resumed. It could adapt, it could wait. And then, perhaps, it could continue. But even that leads to another question. What would remain you in such a transition? If you're no longer made of flesh, if you no longer sleep, breathe, or age, are you still the same person? Or have you become something else? A pattern maybe, a wave of logic unfolding, and perhaps at this point the boundary between traveller and metaphor begins to dissolve. Because what is light, if not a pattern? A wave with no mass, but with energy, a messenger, a path. Perhaps what we've been chasing all along isn't just the speed of light, but the condition of it. Not to go fast, but to be everywhere at once without moving, to exist without aging, to observe without being observed, to become something that is felt, not seen. Maybe this is why the idea of digital minds or post-biological consciousness feels so compelling, not just as a technological fantasy, but as a spiritual metaphor. A longing to escape the ticking clock, the aching body, the limits that weigh us down, not because we hate them, but because we know how fragile they are. And the dream, in its quietest form, is this: that something of us, a thought, a voice, a presence, might persist even when the body fails, that we might not be erased but transformed into signal, into echo, into a ripple of light that carries our story forward. And even if that dream is never real, even if consciousness cannot be preserved without neurons and chemistry, there's something soft and beautiful in the wondering. Because the idea itself changes us. The thought that the mind might survive the fall of the body, even if only as poetry, gives comfort. And it helps us ask a more important question. Why did we want to go so fast in the first place? Was it to reach a distant star? Was it to conquer distance? To race away from time? Or was it to touch the edge of what we could become? To test the shape of the self? To see what parts would remain when all else was stripped away? And maybe, in this place where the ship is gone, the body is gone, and even time is let go, what's left isn't failure, it's stillness, the kind that doesn't need to move. Because if speed has no meaning without time, and space has no meaning without distance, then what remains is not motion, but presence, a quiet, timeless is. And maybe that's what light is, not fast, not moving, but just there, not needing to go anywhere, because it is already where it needs to be. And if consciousness could become that, if we could dream ourselves into such a shape, then maybe this journey was not about reaching the speed of light after all. Maybe it was about learning to be still within it. We often imagine space as empty, a void, a great and silent nothingness that lies between the stars waiting to be crossed. But space, though quiet, is not kind, and it is far from empty. Even the vacuum holds secrets, particles drifting like whispers, radiation humming softly in the dark, energy waiting patiently to be noticed. At everyday speeds, this interstellar medium, the thin scattering of hydrogen atoms, cosmic rays, and invisible fields, poses no threat. You can glide through it like a leaf drifting on a still pond, disturbed only by your own thoughts. But as your velocity increases and then increases again, that still pond becomes a sandstorm, then a hailstorm, then something else entirely. Now you are moving near the speed of light, and the space between stars has turned into a wall of particles, a wall of energy, a wall of light itself, and that wall doesn't stay still. It rushes toward you. The faster you move, the more the ambient particles in space begin to pile up in front of your ship, not metaphorically, physically. From your perspective, they're compressed by your motion, a phenomenon known as relativistic beaming. And they don't just crowd together, they gain energy, they shift frequencies, they blue shift. That soft microwave background that once bathed the universe in a warm, ancient glow, now it surges into ultraviolet, then X-rays, then into gamma radiation, the most energetic, penetrating, and destructive form of light we know. Cosmic rays, once rare and distant, are now dense and sharp, each one packed with so much energy that it behaves more like a bullet than a beam. Your ship is still holding together, for now. But everything it was built to withstand has been exceeded. The hull groans, not from speed alone, but from the rising pressure of pure energy. Radiation is not bouncing off its surface. It is cutting into it, through you. The human body, for all its elegance, all its evolution, was never designed to survive this. Your skin, that thin boundary between you and the rest of the cosmos, begins to suffer first. Not from cold, not from friction, but from light, blue-shifted light. High-energy photons begin to break bonds at the atomic level. DNA strands unravel, not over years, but in seconds. Cells swell, rupture, collapse. The structure of living matter begins to liquefy, not from heat, not from lack of oxygen, but from too much information in the light. Because light, at this frequency, is no longer a messenger of colour or warmth. It is a blade. Your retinas, if still functional, would register nothing but brightness. Not white, not blue, just saturation. The signal is too strong. Perception collapses into overload, and the heat, that comes next. Because as radiation pours into your ship, even through it, it doesn't just pass, it lingers, it transfers energy. And energy, when trapped in a small space, becomes heat. Your ship, sleek and streamlined in the slow beginnings of this journey, is now a kind of oven. A sealed container absorbing energy faster than it can radiate it away. Even with perfect shielding, the kind we don't yet know how to build, the interior begins to climb. Not from the ship's engines, but from the cosmos itself. The stars behind you, red-shifted and fading, still emit energy. The front, now a concentrated tunnel of light, sends wave after wave of destruction inward. Temperature rises, molecules vibrate, systems fail. There is no fan you can turn on, no coolant you can pump, no window you can crack open to let it out. Because space does not take heat away easily. In the vacuum, you cannot rely on convection or conduction. You must radiate it, and at this speed, radiation is the very thing trying to kill you. It's a trap with no exit. Your body begins to cook. Not in a cinematic burst, not in a fireball, not in some violent flash, but slowly, thoroughly, relentlessly, like paper placed near a sun lamp, first curling, then browning, then turning to ash. The organs fail. The brain, shielded but not immune, begins to absorb its final inputs, noise, noise, and more noise, each signal indistinguishable from pain. The self is still there, flickering, but the house it lives in is falling apart. And still, the journey continues. There's a surreal quality to this, isn't there? That light, something we associate with clarity, beauty, warmth, is now the destroyer. That the thing we need to see has become the thing that prevents seeing. That the more we chase light, the more it turns to fire, and that's when the final realization arrives. It's not just that the body can't survive this. It's not just that the ship can't hold together. It's that information itself begins to fail. The signals in your neurons, electrical impulses travelling down axons, triggering thought, memory, recognition, are sequence-based. They need order. They need time. They need protection. Radiation destroys order. It injects randomness. It fractures symmetry. It flips bits, erases pathways, scrambles logic. What was once a coherent signal, "This is who I am," becomes static. First pain, then noise, then silence. Not the silence of peace, the silence of unravelling. And yet, you're still part of the universe, still riding its laws, still moving, if we can call it that, through a space that is no longer space, toward a speed that is no longer travel. You're not just being destroyed, you are being restructured. The atoms that once formed you, the carbon, the oxygen, the calcium, the phosphates and proteins, are scattering now. Not randomly, but according to the laws of energy, conservation and decay. You're becoming something else. Still matter, still pattern, but not you. Not the self that listened to music, not the self that looked at stars. You're no longer a person in a ship. You're becoming a story in the light. You've seen the body falter, the skin torn open by radiation, the tissues overcooked by heat, the atoms disassembled by the sharp fingers of light. But long before the final cell gives up, something quieter begins to fail, something more intimate than flesh and far more fragile. Your mind. Not the poetic mind, the metaphorical spirit or the philosophical you that dreams of stars. This is the biological mind, the physical network of neurons and electrical patterns, the trembling loops of chemistry and timing that make memory possible, that turn sensory data into awareness, that allow a self to form and a thought to echo in return. You are made in part of rhythms, tiny, delicate, interwoven cycles, electrical pulses, neurotransmitter releases, feedback loops, all synchronized like the mechanisms inside a finely tuned clock. The brain is not simply a storage device or a thinking machine. It is a temporal organ, a body that keeps time internally, not in seconds or minutes, but in the precise spacing between signals. At rest, your neurons fire in carefully coordinated patterns. Some impulses travel at 100 meters per second, others much slower. They arrive at synapses just when they must. The order of their arrival shapes everything. The meaning of a word, the memory of a face, the awareness that you are the one doing the thinking. But what happens to rhythm when time itself begins to fail? Let's return to the ship. You are still moving, almost at light speed, though not quite. From the outside world, you appear frozen in motion. Years pass for others while mere seconds slip by for you. Time, as experienced externally, is dilated, stretched. But internally, inside your ship and inside your body, time still feels familiar. Or it would, if the systems that depended on it could still function. Because now the issue is not how you experience time, but how time behaves inside you. How it threads its way through your nervous system. How it flows between one neuron and the next. And here, under such extreme conditions, that flow begins to break down. Why? Because your frame of reference is no longer stable. At near-light speeds, the ordering of events becomes uncertain, not just for distant galaxies, but for signals moving from your eye to your brain, or from one cortical region to another. The fine-tuned choreography of thought, a leads to B, which triggers C, begins to slip. Imagine trying to watch a movie, but the frames arrive out of order. Sometimes the ending flashes before the middle. Sometimes a character appears without introduction. The story collapses not because the film is damaged, but because sequence has been lost. Now imagine that happening inside your own awareness. Sensory data arrives, but is no longer interpreted correctly. Your brain still receives input, light, heat, sound, but the processing order unravels. Images appear without origin. Words are heard without context. A thought sparks but cannot find its conclusion. The system doesn't crash all at once. It just stops making sense. And soon, even that stops. The brain relies on energy, not just to function, but to keep its structure alive. Sodium-potassium pumps, synaptic vesicle release, oxygen flow, all require order and all require time. But time is no longer coherent, and as it slips away, the internal structures of thought do too. At first, this might feel like a kind of confusion, a fog of perception, then perhaps a flattening. No before, no after, just flashes, static, echoes, and then silence. Not unconsciousness in the usual sense, not sleep, not a dreamless black, but the absence of processing, the failure of memory to anchor anything. You're no longer building a past. You're no longer anticipating a future. You're drifting in a perpetual, timeless present that does not accumulate. There is no moment to hold on to, no thread connecting you to yourself. From the outside, the brain might still be intact, physically, but functionally it has dissolved. It is no longer a mind. It is no longer you. This is not just the body failing. This is identity unraveling. And it's not from trauma. It's not from impact. It's from a soft disintegration of order, the quiet, inevitable result of extreme motion, pushing biology past its natural limits. Time is not optional for a living thing. It is not a backdrop. It is the medium in which we exist, and when it collapses, so do we. And yet, even in this, there is something gentle, because if the process is slow, as it might be, then the first thing to go is not feeling. It's the awareness of time itself. You don't suffer in sequence. You don't lose a thread and panic. You simply become unanchored. You drift. Thought loses meaning. Identity unweaves. But there is no alarm, no warning bell, because the system that would ring it is the one dissolving. And here, in the final quiet, a strange peace may descend. Because if nothing is ordered, then nothing is painful. If moments no longer connect, then regret, longing, fear all dissolve with them. And perhaps this is the softest truth in this entire journey, that long before you are physically undone, you are gently lifted out of time, not torn, but released, not erased, but let go. You were once a traveller, then a passenger, then a pattern, and now a pause. So far we've imagined a traveller who begins as a person, a soft biological self wrapped in a body that breathes, remembers and ages, and follows that self toward the edge of what is possible. Along the way, speed has blurred the world, space has collapsed, and time has grown strange. The body, we've seen, begins to fail. The mind, once rhythmic and electric, begins to dissolve. The traveller we once recognised becomes something more like a ghost, not gone, but transformed by motion, radiation, and the loosening of sequence. And yet, we're still telling the story, still listening, still wondering, is that truly the end? Or is there something else, waiting just past the moment where biology can't go? This is where science begins to open its hand and let imagination take the lead. Because although the laws of physics are clear about what happens to a living human at near-light speeds, they say little about what could happen to a non-biological mind. A mind no longer made of cells, but of circuits, or algorithms, or something even stranger. Let's call this the post-human dream. Not a prediction, but a question. If our bodies cannot endure the journey, could our consciousness? Some thinkers, scientists, philosophers, engineers of the speculative kind, have imagined uploading the self, not in the science fiction sense of pressing a button and becoming software, but as a slow, careful transfer, mapping the brain bit by bit, recreating the architecture of thought inside a synthetic frame, not just memory, but cognition, pattern, identity, a digital mind. It would not need air. It would not decay under heat or cold. Its thoughts would not depend on sodium ions or fragile membranes, and in theory it might survive a journey close to light speed, because it would not rely on synchronized biology. It could operate in packets, fragments, paused and resumed. It could adapt, it could wait, and then perhaps it could continue. But even that leads to another question. What would remain you in such a transition? If you're no longer made of flesh, if you no longer sleep, breathe or age, are you still the same person? Or have you become something else? A pattern maybe, a wave of logic unfolding, and perhaps at this point the boundary between traveller and metaphor begins to dissolve. Because what is light, if not a pattern? A wave with no mass but with energy, a messenger, a path. Perhaps what we've been chasing all along isn't just the speed of light, but the condition of it. Not to go fast, but to be everywhere at once, without moving. To exist without aging. To observe without being observed. To become something that is felt, not seen. Maybe this is why the idea of digital minds or post-biological consciousness feels so compelling. Not just as a technological fantasy, but as a spiritual metaphor. A longing to escape the ticking clock, the aching body, the limits that weigh us down, not because we hate them, but because we know how fragile they are. And the dream, in its quietest form, is this: that something of us, a thought, a voice, a presence, might persist even when the body fails, that we might not be erased, but transformed into signal, into echo, into a ripple of light that carries our story forward. And even if that dream is never real, even if consciousness cannot be preserved without neurons and chemistry, there's something soft and beautiful in the wondering. Because the idea itself changes us. The thought that the mind might survive the fall of the body, even if only as poetry, gives comfort. And it helps us ask a more important question. Why did we want to go so fast in the first place? Was it to reach a distant star? Was it to conquer distance? To race away from time? Or was it to touch the edge of what we could become? To test the shape of the self? To see what parts would remain when all else was stripped away? And maybe, in this place where the ship is gone, the body is gone, and even time has let go, what's left isn't failure, it's stillness, the kind that doesn't need to move. Because if speed has no meaning without time, and space has no meaning without distance, then what remains is not motion, but presence, a quiet, timeless is. And maybe that's what light is, not fast, not moving, but just there, not needing to go anywhere, because it is already where it needs to be. And if consciousness could become that, if we could dream ourselves into such a shape, then maybe this journey was not about reaching the speed of light after all. Maybe it was about learning to be still within it. Perhaps you've heard the phrase, "You can't get there from here." It's a statement of frustration, often muttered while lost in a maze of streets or staring at a GPS gone silent. But in the vastness of space, it might be more than just an inconvenience. It might be a truth of geometry, that even if your destination exists, the path to it could be too long, too slow, too bound by light's strict speed limit. Unless, of course, you fold the map. That's the basic idea behind a wormhole, also known as an Einstein-Rosen bridge. A wormhole is not really a tunnel in the conventional sense. It's not a drilled hole through space, like a subway burrowed beneath a city. It's more like a connection, a link between 2 points in space-time that, while vastly far apart in the usual layout of the universe, are stitched together through a kind of unseen seam. If space were a flat sheet, and let's imagine it is for now, then normally you'd have to travel across its surface to get from point A to point B. But a wormhole suggests you could fold the sheet, just so, until A and B touch. Not because you've moved faster, but because you've changed the shape of the journey. In that image, you aren't breaking the speed limit. You're just taking a different route. It's a lovely idea. Quiet, efficient, almost polite. The mathematics behind it first appeared in the context of general relativity. In 1935, Albert Einstein and Nathan Rosen proposed a solution to Einstein's field equations that connected two separate regions of space-time. The equations allowed it. The theory permitted it. And for decades, physicists have kept returning to the concept, running fingers over its surface like a well-worn page in a book that always feels slightly unfinished. But there's a problem. Well, several problems. The first is stability. The wormholes that fall out of Einstein's equations tend to collapse before anything, or anyone, can pass through them. They pinch shut, the tunnel closes, the shortcut vanishes. Like a dream you wake from too quickly, unless you prop it open with something called exotic matter. This is not exotic like a rare perfume or a distant fruit. Exotic, in this case, means matter that has negative energy density. The kind that repels instead of attracts. The kind that curves space-time in a way that is opposite to what mass normally does. We don't know if such matter exists in the quantities required. We don't know if it can be stabilized. We don't even know if it's truly possible to keep a wormhole mouth from closing without creating a cosmic disaster. But we do know this: the idea persists, not just in physics, but in our collective imagination. Because the wormhole represents something more than a transportation mechanism. It represents a kind of grace, a gentle workaround, a whisper that says maybe the universe is not just a wall of limits, but a space of options. And yet, like all good ideas in physics, it comes with paradoxes. If a wormhole connects two distant points in space, could it also connect two distant points in time? And if so, what happens to causality? Could you send a message back to your earlier self? Could you prevent the message from being sent? The old time travel paradoxes dressed in new geometry. Some models suggest that any attempt to create such contradictions would cause the wormhole to self-destruct, that the universe, in its quiet wisdom, defends its timeline with the same strictness that it defends its speed limits. Others leave the door slightly ajar, wondering if perhaps time is not as fragile as we think. In most stories, wormholes are depicted as tunnels. You enter, you travel, you exit. But in truth, they may feel like instantaneous displacement. From your perspective, there may be no journey at all, no passage, no motion. You are simply somewhere else. The same way light, from its own point of view, doesn't experience distance. You might not experience travel. So then, what is a wormhole really? Is it a path? Or is it a redefinition of proximity? It's a quiet revolution in how we think of movement. It tells us that perhaps the universe isn't made of obstacles, but of contours. That some lines are not meant to be crossed but folded. That some distances are not meant to be conquered, but softened. There is a stillness to this idea, because unlike rockets and engines and drives that roar and burn and climb, the wormhole doesn't speed you up. It doesn't ask more of your body. It doesn't demand infinite energy. It just rearranges space so that speed becomes irrelevant. You could think of it like falling through memory, not a race to remember, but a sudden arrival at something already known. A shortcut not through effort, but through recognition. And perhaps if the laws of physics permit such folds, even if only in theory, then there may be gentler ways to move than through force. The traveller, after all, may not need to push harder. They may just need to see the map differently. And so, as we continue this journey, we leave the wormhole behind, not as a certainty but as a possibility. A reminder that not all paths are visible, that some doors don't swing open, but appear where there was once only wall. And if space can bend, what else might? Perhaps the space itself, around a traveller. Perhaps the frame in which motion is measured. Perhaps reality itself. Certainly. Let's now continue with session 14, Warp Drives and Star Trek's Echo, where instead of folding space into shortcuts, we explore the poetic idea of carrying space itself with you, like a quiet ripple moving through the fabric of the cosmos. Session 14, Warp Drives and Star Trek's Echo. If wormholes are the universe's way of whispering there's another path, then the warp drive is something else entirely. It is not a door in space. It is not a tunnel or a fold or a bridge. It is the idea that space, the very fabric of reality, can be stretched, pulled, shaped, and that a traveller, without moving through space in the usual sense, can ride the wave of that distortion. No longer trying to outrun light, just changing what light has to outrun. This strange and elegant idea traces its origins to a man named Miguel Alcubierre, who in 1994 published a speculative solution to Einstein's field equations, one that allowed for faster-than-light travel without technically violating the cosmic speed limit. Because, you see, in Einstein's theory of general relativity, there is a catch. While nothing can move faster than light through space, space itself is not bound by that rule. Space can expand, it can contract, it can ripple. The Big Bang, after all, pushed space outward faster than light in the early universe. Not because anything moved through it, but because the fabric itself grew. Alcubierre asked a bold question. What if we could make space behave like that? On demand. Imagine a bubble of space-time. Inside, you sit comfortably. Your ship not moving at all, merely floating in this bubble like a quiet pearl in water. But behind you, space expands, stretching like dough pulled gently apart. In front of you, space contracts, compressed like a wave, folding into itself. Your ship, carried by this imbalance, drifts forward. To an outside observer, you're moving, and not just moving, accelerating faster than any light beam could chase. But inside the bubble you are still. No relativistic mass, no radiation, no distortion of time. The laws of physics remain intact, locally. It's a poetic idea, really. That you don't have to break the rules to travel beyond them. You just have to step sideways like a dancer slipping into a rhythm that the floor itself is setting. And yet, for all its mathematical charm, the Alcubierre drive has problems. Big ones. To shape space in the way described, you would need exotic matter. Again, that strange theoretical stuff with negative energy density. The same kind needed to keep wormholes open. The same kind we've never been able to produce in useful amounts. And even if we could, the energy requirements are absurd. Estimates vary, but some early calculations suggested you might need more energy than exists in the observable universe, just to move a single ship. Later refinements have reduced that number, slightly, but it remains vast, beyond fusion, beyond antimatter, beyond anything we can currently imagine harvesting or storing. There are also issues with causality. If you can outrun light, can you outrun cause and effect? Could a ship travelling in a warp bubble arrive before it left? Would that break the sequence of reality? Would paradoxes form like cracks in a frozen lake? We don't know. And then there's the horizon problem. The edge of the warp bubble may trap anything that tries to enter or exit. The traveller inside might not be able to send signals forward, might not even be able to stop the bubble once it begins, a runaway ride with no brakes. And yet, the idea still lingers, perhaps because it's not just physics, it's longing. The warp drive represents our yearning not just to go far, but to go gently, to move without tearing, to travel without trauma, not to conquer space, but to carry home with us, inside a bubble of safety, moving like a dream across an unmoving sky. Even its name, warp, is soft. It doesn't imply force, it implies curvature, a slow bending of reality around the self, a quiet reshaping. And when we speak of warp drives, we also speak of stories, of shows watched late at night, of captains pointing toward unknown stars, of ships humming through invisible currents, of science fiction that felt like invitation, not to escape Earth, but to imagine what kind of being we might become if we could move without harm. The warp drive in this way is not just a mechanism, it's a mood. It tells us that maybe the future doesn't have to be about overcoming. Maybe it can be about flowing, about travelling with the grain of the universe instead of against it. And even if it never becomes real, even if no ship ever sails on space-time's curve, the very fact that our equations allow it, however delicately, suggests something beautiful. That the universe may contain paths we haven't walked, not because they're forbidden, but because we haven't learned the right rhythm. And so we leave the warp drive behind, not with the coldness of abandoned engineering, but with the warmth of a lullaby, a soft idea carried forward on equations and dreams, waiting, patient, perhaps not for activation, but simply for understanding. Because if we don't move faster than light, perhaps we can still move with it. We've crossed the galaxy in imagination. We've opened wormholes and wrapped ourselves in space-time bubbles. We've stretched the laws of physics into beautiful, fragile shapes. But now we arrive at a question that isn't about engines or ships, or even energy, but about the self, the one doing the travelling, the one wondering. What if the thing that needs to move isn't the body? What if the journey, the real one, happens somewhere else? Let's begin with something very small. In quantum physics, there is a phenomenon known as quantum teleportation. It's not the kind seen in movies, where a person vanishes in one place and appears in another. It's stranger and more abstract. It's about information, specifically the exact state of a quantum particle, its spin, its orientation, its identity, can be transmitted from one particle to another, no matter how far apart they are. The process involves entanglement, a kind of invisible bond between particles that lets them mirror each other's behaviour instantly. When used carefully, this bond allows us to copy the state of one particle into another. But here's the key. In order to preserve the laws of quantum mechanics, the original particle is destroyed. The copy is perfect, but it's also the only one. Which leads to a provocative question. If you could copy the exact state of a human brain, every atom, every charge, every pattern of thought, and then transmit that to a new location, would that be you? The original is gone. The body that sat in the old place, that breathed and remembered and saw stars, is no longer functioning, but the pattern remains, fully recreated elsewhere, reassembled down to the smallest detail. Is that survival, or is that death followed by imitation? Is identity a matter of continuity, like a single thread stretching through time? Or is it a matter of structure, a repeating shape that can be recreated and therefore preserved? It's a question that philosophers and physicists alike have debated, often with no clear resolution. But in this moment, as we imagine travel not by speed but by information, it becomes something more intimate. It becomes a question of what you believe the self truly is. Because if the self is a pattern, then it can be moved without moving. If the self is structure, then space and time are optional. If the self is a rhythm of thought, a geometry of cognition, then perhaps it doesn't need to ride a ship. Perhaps it can leap. Quantum teleportation doesn't require speed. It doesn't race through a tunnel. It doesn't contract space or wrap around stars. It simply copies the universe's tiniest details and applies them somewhere new, a whisper between particles, a movement that isn't movement. And that idea of consciousness as something transferable gently brushes up against ancient thoughts. In many spiritual traditions, there is the belief that the soul, or the essence, is not bound to flesh, that it can shift, migrate, be reborn, not as a technology, but as a truth felt inwardly. And here, science and spirit almost touch, because both ask, what is the essential part of you? Is it the cells, the voice, the memories, or is it the perspective, the awareness, the quiet observer behind it all? If science ever does find a way to move patterns of consciousness across great distances, not by propulsion, but by projection, it might be the final form of travel, one where speed is irrelevant, because the traveller is never delayed. They simply appear, no ship, no journey, just a new place, with familiar thoughts now awake inside it. And even if such a future never comes, the idea leaves a soft mark, because even now, in a way, your mind already does this. It leaps. When you remember, your awareness travels back in time. When you imagine, your thoughts jump to places you've never been. When you dream, you're somewhere else, perhaps even someone else, and yet it all feels real. Consciousness, it seems, is already moving faster than anything else in the universe, not by violating physics, but by not needing to obey it in the first place. A thought can span galaxies in a second. A dream can hold a lifetime in a moment. An idea can fold time and space inward, like a letter tucked into a small envelope. So what then is travel? Is it movement through space, or is it change in awareness? Perhaps the greatest journeys don't require motion at all. Perhaps the most profound exploration happens when we sit still and think, when we close our eyes and see the stars not as points of light in a sky, but as questions rising from within. And if that's true, then maybe we already know how to travel at the speed of light. Maybe we do it all the time, when we imagine, when we love, when we remember, when we drift off into sleep, not with engines, but with attention. So let's not worry, for now, about building teleporters or storing minds in circuits. Let's just acknowledge the quiet miracle of being able to picture ourselves elsewhere, to wonder, to reach, not with hands, but with being. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Because in the stillness of imagination, we've already gone farther than any ship ever has. Time feels like such a certainty. It ticks beside us in every room we enter, waits outside every window we gaze through. It lines our faces as we age. It stretches behind us like a trail of memories, and ahead of us like a path just out of view. It tells us when to wake, when to rest, when to say goodbye. We measure it, chase it, fear it, treasure it. But what if time is not what it seems? What if this companion, so familiar and firm, is actually just a kind of illusion, not a lie, but a lens? A way we experience change rather than something that flows. In physics, time can be many things. Sometimes it is dimension, like space, something you move through. Sometimes it is an emergent property, something that arises from patterns and thermodynamics, not something that exists on its own. Sometimes it's simply a parameter, a mathematical placeholder, no more meaningful than a variable in a formula. But in human experience, time is more than theory. It is felt. It's what makes a memory soft, a moment sacred, a silence long. It's the invisible substance we live inside, like air for the body, like rhythm for a song. And it might just be a story we tell ourselves to make sense of motion. One of the most haunting truths physics has offered us is this: the laws of nature don't need time to move forward. The equations that govern particles work just as well in reverse. If you watch them like a film, you can play the reel backwards and the math still holds. So why then do we remember the past but not the future? Why do we grow older, not younger? Why does the coffee cool, the glass shatter, the sun set? The answer may lie in a concept known as entropy, the tendency for systems to move from order to disorder, from structured to scattered, from neat to natural mess. Imagine a deck of cards perfectly arranged. Now shuffle, then shuffle again and again. The number of messy configurations far outnumbers the neat ones. So as time passes, systems naturally move from unlikely order to likely disorder. Not because they have to, but because that's where the numbers lead. And entropy, some physicists argue, is time, or at least the arrow of it. It's not that time flows, but that things change and we notice. And in noticing, we create a line, before, now after. But this line is not carved into the universe. It is woven inside the mind. Think of a dream. You're asleep, eyes closed, safe under blankets. The room is still. The clock moves forward 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. But inside your mind, entire hours may unfold. Stories rise and fall. Conversations are had. Places are visited. And then you wake and realize no more than minutes have passed. Or picture a moment of awe, standing before something vast, a canyon, a night sky, a song that stirs something deep. Time pauses, or seems to. Your thoughts slow, the breath becomes aware of itself. Seconds stretch like silk in the wind. Now contrast that with waiting in a long line, or sitting in traffic, or staring at a blank screen. Time there feels thick, slow, stubborn. Every second announces itself. It's not the clock that changes, it's you. Time, in many ways, is not a thing we move through, but a sensation our brain creates in response to experience. This is not to say time isn't real, but it might not be fundamental. It might not be the river we float along, but the ripples left behind as we touch the water. And light. Light may hold the clue. Because light, that strange traveller we've been chasing, seems to ignore time altogether. A photon, moving at light speed, experiences no duration. From its point of view, if such a thing can be imagined, there is no before and after, no start, no journey, no end. It simply is. And what's more, light carries memory, not its own, but ours. It brings us images of the past, stars as they once were, galaxies long gone. When we look into the night sky, we are not seeing now, we are seeing then. Light is not just brightness, it is a time capsule. So here we are in a universe where time flows for us, but perhaps not for it. Where clocks tick, but only because the gears spin. Where memory and entropy and awareness weave something that feels like motion. And perhaps that's enough. Even if time is an illusion, it is one that holds us. Even if it's a story, it's one we're inside. Even if it's not a river, we still feel its current. And isn't that beautiful? Because it means that when you remember someone you love, when you wait for the light to change, when you sit beside someone and listen as the minutes pass, you are participating in a quiet miracle. The miracle of perceived time, not just physics, but poetry. And if the arrow of time is tied to memory, then maybe forgetting is not the loss of the past, but a way for time to keep moving forward. We forget so we can change. We let go so we can grow. We say goodbye, not because time took someone from us, but because time is the space in which presence once lived, and now makes room for something new. And so we drift, not down a river, but across a canvas of change. Time as shadow, time as soft unfolding, time as the pause between two thoughts. And if light is the thing that never waits, then maybe we are what time uses to measure waiting. When you think of light, what comes to mind? Perhaps the sun on your face in the morning, the way a lamp warms the corner of a room, the shimmer across a lake, or the faint glow of a distant galaxy in a telescope's eye. We often think of light in terms of illumination, a guide, a warmth, a way to see. In physics, we think of it in terms of speed, 299,792,458 meters per second in vacuum, the universe's ultimate limit, the line no particle with mass can cross, the great constant in Einstein's equations, the silent referee of all cosmic movement. But light is not just fast, it is also structured and rhythmic and, in its own quiet way, profoundly connected to who you are. Light is a wave, first and foremost. Not a wave in water, not a pulse in string, but a self-propagating rhythm in the fields that fill all of space. An electric field rises, gives birth to a magnetic one, which then regenerates the electric one. A looping dance of oscillation that spreads outward. This is not just motion, this is coherence. And in its movement, it vibrates. Each colour you see is simply a different frequency of vibration. Red, long and slow. Blue, tight and quick. Ultraviolet, tighter still. Light is not simply about moving fast, it's about how often it changes as it moves. Imagine it like music. A note is not just a sound, it's a pattern of vibration. Light is that too. Not random, but tuned, harmonised. And somehow, in ways that seem almost poetic, your entire body is shaped by these vibrations. Before you were born, light helped choreograph the growth of your cells. It told your circadian rhythms when to begin. It helped guide the earlier sparks of sight inside you. It synchronized you with the world. Even now, light is constantly informing your biology. Not just what you see, but how you sleep, how you heal, how you feel. It's not merely a carrier of images, it is an ingredient. Your skin responds to it. Your mood shifts with it. Plants grow by it, and you, by eating them, carry that light forward. The photons that touched a leaf become part of your body. The sunlight of 10,000 years ago still echoes inside you, in bones made strong by the crops it grew, in the thoughts sparked by the foods it nurtured. So when we say light is important, we're not just talking about physics, we're talking about ancestry, about inheritance, about something that lives in and through us, not just around us. And here's another thing. Light isn't just external, it's within. When neurons fire in your brain, they emit tiny bursts of light, biophotons. Faint and delicate, yes, but measurable. Some theories, still speculative, suggest that these internal pulses might play a role in consciousness, or at least be a signature of its activity. It's not certain, but it is suggestive. Light as signal, light as whisper, light as awareness. So what does that mean then? When we chase light as speed, what are we really following? Maybe not motion, maybe not escape velocity, but a kind of order. A rhythm we recognize because it matches something in us. Because to be alive is, in a very real sense, to resonate. Your heart beats in a rhythm. Your breath moves in cycles. Your thoughts arrive in waves, emotion, memory, imagination. Your brain even produces patterns, alpha waves, beta waves, gamma waves, each with its own tempo, its own inner music. And light fits into this, not as conductor, but as companion. It was here before you. It will be here after. It never tires, never slows. It moves, not because it is rushed, but because it does not need to stop. It does not need to rest. It does not need to age. In some ways, it never began, and still, it shapes everything. It gives the universe structure, letting stars shine, molecules form, atoms communicate. It draws the lines we call vision, but it also draws the lines of possibility. What can be known? What can be seen? What can be reached? But perhaps most beautifully, it teaches us how to be present. Light does not look back. It does not wait. It does not anticipate. It just moves. Perfectly. Always. Exactly as it must. And in that, maybe it offers a kind of wisdom. To live like light is not to move quickly. It is to move completely. To be what you are, clearly, fully, radiantly, in the moment you're in. To illuminate, not to burn. To travel, not to rush. To be the message and the messenger. And when we look up at the stars and trace the photons that began their journey before we were born, photons that left their home suns before our species even knew how to write, we are not just looking at light. We are looking at time, memory, vibration, and presence, all wrapped into one. And maybe that's the most profound truth of all. That light, this thing we measure in wavelengths and speeds, is also a mirror. And when we try to catch it, what we're really trying to find is the part of ourselves that never had to run in the first place. You've spent this journey imagining speed, great speed, speed that bends space and folds time. You've watched the stars blur, watched clocks slow, watched distances collapse. You've travelled through wormholes, warped bubbles, quantum whispers. You've asked how a body might endure such a journey, and whether a mind might leave the body behind altogether. But now you find yourself not in motion, but in stillness. Because this is the strange thing about the speed of light. it isn't experienced. From the moment a photon is emitted to the moment it's absorbed, whether it travels a centimetre or 10 billion light years, no time passes for it, no distance is crossed. From the photon's point of view, and this is difficult to say precisely, because a photon does not have a frame of reference the way we do. The beginning and end of its journey are the same event. There is no in-between, no middle, no process, no unfolding of experience. It simply is. So let's return to that central question. If you could somehow travel at the speed of light, not just near it, not just within a warp field, but at it, what would happen to your sense of self? Would there be thoughts? Would there be sequence? Would there be a you at all? So much of what we understand as identity is tied to duration, to change, to motion through time. You are not the same person you were 10 years ago. You are shaped by memories, by decisions, by the passing of days. Even your most private sense of I has texture, the before, the now, the after. But at the speed of light, that entire structure collapses. Time no longer flows, processes no longer sequence. Sensations no longer ripple outward. They are simply fixed. The self, as we understand it, that moving observer who learns, remembers, reflects, cannot survive that stillness. Not because it is destroyed, but because it is no longer meaningful. There is no room for narrative, no possibility for change. And without change, can there be consciousness? This is the paradox of the lightspeed traveller. You become everywhere, but experience nothing. You're present at all points of your journey, but you never take the journey. It's not motion, but presence without passage. To our minds, trained by years and sleep and movement, that's hard to picture. We think of awareness as a thread stretched across moments. We know ourselves by what we feel next. But the photon feels no next. It does not become. It simply is. And in that isness, something strangely beautiful happens. The traveller who reaches light speed loses the burden of becoming, and in doing so may touch something like pure being. But again, is that still you? If you don't remember the journey, did you really go? If you don't feel the passage, are you still the traveller? Some philosophers say yes, that the self is not the motion, but the pattern, and the pattern still exists even in stasis. Others say no, that the self is defined by movement, by unfolding, that to lose time is to lose meaning. But maybe the answer isn't either. Maybe it's something softer, quieter, something that sits just outside the edge of language. Maybe the self that moves is different from the self that remains. And perhaps both are real. You might think of it like this. Imagine a song. You hear it played, note after note, second by second. It takes time, it has rhythm, it has rise and fall. That's your normal self. Lived experience unfolding across a temporal arc. Now imagine the sheet music. Still, quiet, all at once. It contains the entire song, every note, every pause, every crescendo. But it does not play. It simply holds the possibility. That is the self at light speed. Not playing, not unfolding, but existing in totality, without motion. One is lived, the other is known. And perhaps the final transformation of the traveller is to become this kind of self, not in place of the old, but alongside it. Not movement, but memory. Not action, but presence. So as you sit here now, listening or drifting, know this. Your identity is not a fixed point. It is a rhythm, a shimmer between time and stillness. And if you were to accelerate forever, reaching that luminous speed where clocks go silent and distances fall away, what might remain is not your thoughts, but your form, your pattern, stretched across space, your shape, written in the light. Not a body, not even a mind, but a trace, a ripple, the the soft echo of a journey so fast it didn't need to happen. And so, this question we began with, what would really happen if you travelled at the speed of light, no longer feels like a question about physics. It feels like a question about being, about what part of you is motion and what part of you is light. At last, you lie still, no longer imagining engines or bending space or riding photons through the darkness, no longer chasing the horizon or calculating the path. The stars are quiet now. The questions are softer. The ship, if there ever was one, has slowed to a drift. And now, you close your eyes, you breathe, and something begins, not out there, but within. Sleep, for all its simplicity, is still one of the greatest mysteries we know. Every night you surrender to it. You dissolve your identity, loosen your grip on thought, and step into a place where time stretches and snaps, bends and folds. A place where minutes can contain hours, where seconds bloom into full stories, where moments hold impossible weight, or none at all. Dreams do not care for clocks. They are not sequenced. They are woven. You may fall asleep feeling like yourself, with plans, memories, burdens, but soon those dissolve. You may find yourself walking through a city that never existed, speaking to someone who passed long ago, flying without wings, moving between decades, identities, places, and thoughts. You may be a child again, or someone else entirely. Time in dreams is not a river. It is a pool of reflections, and you are both the stone and the ripple. Physiologically, this dreamlike voyage is carried out in REM sleep, rapid eye movement, a stage where brain activity mirrors waking life, but the muscles are paralyzed and the body becomes still. The mind, however, is anything but still. It moves through space with no resistance, through memory with no anchor, through feeling with no filter, and this is where the deepest connection emerges, because in that state, in REM, you experience something eerily familiar to the traveller we imagined at the speed of light, a collapse of distance, a dissociation from time, a suspension of self. What is it, after all, to imagine being everywhere at once, to have no sense of sequence or movement, to exist outside the framework of seconds and hours? It sounds impossible, until you remember that last night, while asleep, you may have lived an entire day in a dream that lasted only minutes. That is not fiction, that is you. And so, perhaps the closest you will ever come to experiencing lightspeed travel is not through machines or theories or distant stars, but through dreams. When the mind becomes the vessel, when thought becomes motion, when perception lets go of chronology and builds meaning from texture instead of time. In that sense, your brain is already a kind of starship, but one with no engines. Just rhythms, just waves, just patterns of firing neurons that create worlds not with distance, but with depth. And in those quiet travels, something profound happens. You step beyond the boundaries of self. You become the observer of something vast and strange. A dream may place you in the body of another person, or merge the people you love into strange new forms, or blend places that have never met. And you, the dreamer, simply accept. It's not confusion, it's allowance. Because dreams aren't linear, they're layered. And perhaps that's what it would feel like to travel at impossible speeds. Not to move quickly, but to move inward until every place you might go is already part of you. Because dreams are not about destinations, they're about states, and so is light. When we speak of a photon's journey, we often forget that it doesn't experience the space it crosses. It doesn't see the stars it passes or the time it takes. It exists as if its entire path is a single frozen moment. No before, no after, just presence. And when you sleep, you come very close to that. You let go of becoming. You settle into being. The body lies still. The senses withdraw. The outer world fades. and what remains is you, not as a name or a job or a memory, but as a traveller, not through space, not through time, but through possibility. You're not bound to here or now. You're not confined to this planet, this room, this bed. Your mind unfolds inward, carrying fragments of days, echoes of feelings, faces that shimmer like distant galaxies. You drift without direction, and that drifting is the journey. So when people ask what it would feel like to reach the speed of light, maybe the answer isn't in the equations. Maybe it's right here, in the soft act of closing your eyes and slipping into yourself, where the body stops, where the world quiets, where time becomes flexible, and you, the quiet observer, become the centre of a cosmos made not of stars but of thought. You've been there before, you'll be there again tonight. And maybe, just maybe, that's the point of this entire journey. Not to escape time, not to beat light, but to discover that the most mysterious voyage you can take happens every night, without effort, without movement, and without needing to go anywhere at all. Light never waits. It does not ask for permission, or pause to remember where it has been. It does not tire or hesitate or long for a destination. It simply continues, not because it is fast, but because it has no need to stop. From our human point of view, it looks like speed, like something racing forward, overtaking all things. But from light's own strange perspective, that timeless, spaceless state we've tried so long to imagine, it is not in a rush at all. It is not even travelling. It is simply there, always there. And maybe that is why we have spent so many centuries chasing it. Not because we truly wish to move faster, but because somewhere deep within us lives a quieter longing, the wish to become still enough to hold all moments at once, to be something that does not fear change, that does not measure itself by distance or time, something that never needs to arrive because it has never truly left. Light, in the end, is not the goal. It is the mirror. It reflects the way the universe can be both everywhere and nowhere, eternal yet invisible. It reminds us that presence does not always mean motion, that understanding does not always require movement, and that perhaps the greatest journeys are not outward, but inward, into the slow rhythm of breath, into the gentle silence behind thought, into the place where awareness flickers like a distant star. You've followed that thread across galaxies and paradoxes, through the folds of theory and the whispers of imagination. You've pictured impossible speeds, suspended yourself between dimensions, and borrowed the eyes of particles and dreams. And now, after all that motion, you find yourself here, not at an ending, but at a pause, a place where the question changes, no longer, what would happen if I reached the speed of light, but something softer, something more human? What part of me has always been light? Because you are, in more ways than you realize. The atoms in your body were born inside stars. The calcium in your bones was forged in the heart of an ancient explosion. The light that once passed through the leaves of trees or shimmered across the surface of oceans has entered your eyes, your skin, your blood. It has shaped your thoughts, coloured your memories, and written itself into the quiet chemistry of who you are. You are not merely walking through light, you're made of it, a continuation of the same brilliance that began long before you and will continue long after. Your thoughts are pulses, your senses are waves. Every emotion, every memory, every dream hums softly in the language of oscillation. You're a waveform that knows it is alive, a traveller who remembers just enough to wonder, and as your body relaxes, your breath slows and your mind begins to drift, you come closer to what you were chasing all along. Not speed, not escape, but the absence of resistance. That quiet state where things move effortlessly, not because they are forced, but because they have stopped holding themselves in place, where time no longer races past you, but stretches open like a slow horizon, where thoughts come and go without weight, and you are carried not by momentum, but by stillness itself, like light. In physics, there's a phrase, the invariant speed. It means the one thing that never changes, the constant of the universe. No matter who you are, where you stand, or how fast you move, light remains the same. It does not bend itself for you, and yet it is what shapes everything you see. There is comfort in that, because if light is the constant, and you are made from it, then some part of you is constant too. Even as everything else changes, even as memories fade, even as time slips quietly through your hands, that part endures, the part that listens, the part that watches, the part that waits, not to arrive, but to notice what has always been here. So now there is nothing left to chase, nothing left to prove. You are here, you are light. You are the silence that follows a star's explosion. You are the hum of a photon crossing the dark. You are the thought between thoughts, the awareness that remains when everything else falls quiet. And that is enough. So rest now, small traveller. You've crossed impossible distances without taking a single step. You've dissolved time without breaking it. You've become light, not by moving faster, but by learning to be still within it. Sleep gently. The light has already arrived. It always has.